Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Please take a seat. Kiana made a gesture for Lux to sit on the chair beside her bed. Make yourself comfortable. The old lady smiled before sitting on top of her bed. What she was going to ask the half-elf was a question that had been bothering her for a long time, even before the purple plague infected her body. Lux, when you became the Necromancer of Heaven, I felt a surge of divinity ripple across Solais, Kiana said. I will not lie to you. I have long thought that the gods have abandoned Elysium because they no longer answer our prayers. But when you broke through that wall, I faintly felt the power of divinity. This power could only come from a god, which means that my original assumption is wrong. Lux, are there still gods in Solais and Elysium? Have they not abandoned us? The half-elf didn't expect that Kiana would ask him this kind of question. However, a faint memory appeared inside his head. It was the time when Kai was telling him things about her family, and she mentioned her grandma a couple of times in that discussion. Kiana was the previous high priestess of the Rowan tribe. During her era, the gods of Solais and Elysium were still present. However, before passing down her position to her daughter, Dahlia, she had sensed that the gods and goddesses whom she offered her prayers to had become silent. It had been many years since she last heard their voice. Even Dahlia, who had become the high priestess after her, felt that there was no longer any connection to the divine beings that watched over the mortals of the world. It was as if all of them had vanished at the same time, not even saying words of farewell to their believers who had dedicated their lives to worshiping them. Lux pondered a bit before making up his mind. Since Kiana had decided to only talk to him without bringing her husband, Maximilian, inside her room, he understood that what they were going to talk about would remain inside the room. The answer is yes and no, Lux replied. The gods, at least, almost all of them, have abandoned both Solais and Elysium. Almost all of them? Keanu looked at Lux with a solemn expression on his face. Does that mean that there are still gods that remain here in our world? Only two gods remain, Lux answered. One protects Elysium, while the other wants to protect Solais. While I cannot tell you the identity of these two gods, I know that they are doing their best in order to secure a future for both worlds, especially Solais. So they have not abandoned us, Kiana closed her eyes. They still care for our worlds. A tear streamed down the side of Kiana's face, making Lux's heart ache. This old lady had suffered a lot from the purple plague, and yet, her hope that the gods hadn't abandoned them kept her going. Hearing that there were still two gods that had remained to protect Solais and Elysium, the sadness she had felt when the gods stopped talking to her lessened drastically. Did they say anything to you? Kiana asked after regaining her composure. Anything that could help save Solais? Lux nodded. They asked me to find the pillars of eternity. After saying these words, a look of surprise flashed on Kiana's face. The pillars of eternity, Kiana said softly. The 5 divine artifacts that have the power to bend the laws of the world to their will. Do you know their location? Lux shook his head. I don't. Do you know, Grandma? I only know the location of 3 of them, Kiana replied. When the pillars of eternity were gathered in the past, the leader of the champions that came from another world tried to convince the others to use the power of the pillars to ascend to godhood. He believed that once they became gods, any kind of problem will be fixed. Tempted by his words, some of the champions sided with him, while the others refused to join his ambitious plan. They believed that they should do as the gods had asked of them and do their duty properly so that they could return to their home world. But the leader of the champions and those who sided with him refused. In the end, a great battle between the two sides tore through the fabric of time and space, destroying the lands of Solais. They refer to this battle as the 100-Year War because even after the Battle of the Champions ended, the war still continued for 100 years. A bitter expression appeared in Kiana's face as she looked at her hands that had seen the passage of time. In the end, the leaders of the champions emerged victorious and vanquished all opposition. However, in the middle of his ascendance ceremony to become a god, the goddess of the world, Idane, descended from the heavens and forcefully snatched one of the pillars, representing hope. This caused the ceremony to fail, forever scarring the leader of the champions. Although she had succeeded, she also received the backlash of the world, stripping her of her divinity. The injury she received back then was too great, so after her power as a god was taken from her, she perished. A god, even though she had been stripped of her divinity, is still a god. This means that if they died, they would cease to exist. In order to stop this from happening, the gods bound the pillar that she had snatched away from the champion to her immortal soul, allowing her to safely enter the cycle of reincarnation. But this method was far from perfect. Because of this, the goddess would enter an infinite cycle of death and rebirth, and would always live a cursed life. Keanu looked at Lux with a solemn expression on her face. One of the pillars would be in her possession, Keanu stated. Also, since she is a goddess, she will always be reborn as a girl. Her body is cursed, so all the cursed ladies in the world have the potential to be her reincarnation. And this includes your lover, Aurora. The old lady sighed. Of course, this is only a possibility. There are many cursed individuals in the world, and some of them are worse off than the others. But even though Aurora's curse has been sealed, I am very familiar with the curse afflicting her body. She is this generation's lady of misfortune, correct? Lux nodded. She is. Kiana also nodded her head in understanding. The second pillar that I know of fell into Elysium. The place where it fell became a holy land, and an organization known as the Divine Army of Light was founded in that place. I have every reason to believe that one of the pillars is with them. I already know of this, Lux commented. We already have an agreement concerning the pillar in their possession. That's good then. Kiana smiled. The last pillar that I know of fell into a very dangerous place, alongside the leader of the champions, who was chosen by the gods to save this world. Lux had a very bad feeling after hearing the old lady's ominous words. The third pillar that I know of, which is the Golden Lion, fell into the abyss, Kiana stated. And its owner, the leader of the champions, is very much alive. One of the pillars is in the abyss, Lux muttered. Grandma, do you know where in the abyss the Golden Lion is located? Keanu shook her head. Wherever the champion is, the pillar will definitely be with him. However, getting that divine artifact from him will not be easy. After all, he is the strongest among those who were summoned into our world. If possible, I don't want you to fight such a being. Being? Lux frowned. Is he not human? Kiana nodded. He was once human, but not after he attempted to ascend into godhood. Although the ceremony stopped midway, what was left of his humanity vanished after that event. He may still look like a human on the surface, but deep inside, I am pretty sure that a monster dwells within. Lux suddenly remembered about the recent activity of the abyssal gates in Elysium. Although he wasn't sure if this latest development was connected to the Pillar of Eternity, he had a feeling that the champion, who was once summoned to save Solais, was involved in it one way or the other. One of the pillars is bound to the soul of a cursed lady, the second one is in the divine army, and the third was in the possession of the champion that fell into the abyss, Lux said softly. Grandma, that leaves only one of the pillars unaccounted for. What do you mean? Kiana asked. Do you know where the fourth pillar is? Lux nodded. My daughter, Aiko, happened to pick it up in one of her adventures in the sea. What? Keanu looked at the half-elf with a doubtful expression on her face. Are you sure about this? Yes, Lux replied. Before she left, she showed it to me. The half-elf could still remember how the baby slime told him that she had picked something very nice on her journey. Wanting to show off to her papa, she summoned the golden anchor, which almost made Lux cough out blood due to disbelief. After asking how she found it, Aiko told him that she picked it up in El Dorito. Of course, Lux knew that Aiko's El Dorito was, in fact, El Dorado. The baby slime had personally asked him for the key, and he gave it to her without thinking twice. In order to confirm his suspicion, he asked the Wraith King, Leoric, whom he had tasked to follow Aiko in her adventures. Leoric confirmed that the golden anchor was indeed one of the pillars, making the half-elf repeatedly kiss the baby slime, who was more than happy to receive his kisses. If what you say is true, then you are one step closer to collecting the pillars of eternity, Kiana said after she had regained her composure. But the last one might prove to be a bit difficult to obtain. The Pillar of Hope is represented by a golden candle. This is also a soul-bound divine artifact, and there are no records about who could possibly possess it. Lux nodded in agreement. The only saving grace was that Ariel had told him that he was fated to come across all of the Pillars of Eternity. But whether he would be able to get them or not was all up to him. One step at a time, Lux thought. Fortunately, Grandma had some information about where the other pillars are. I better talk to Aurora later, just in case. Aurora was Miss Fortune's beloved. Lux believed that, although there were many ladies in the world who were suffering from curses, his lover was definitely one of the prime candidates to house the Pillar of Love, which resembled a heart-shaped locket in her soul. A lion figurine, a scale, an anchor, a heart-shaped locket, and a candle. These were the 5 pillars of eternity. Right now, Lux, or rather, Eiko, was in possession of one of them. The Divine Army also had one, which was the golden scale that represented justice. The golden lion was in the abyss, and the golden heart-shaped locket was in the possession of a cursed lady. Only the golden candle remained, but this was the least of Lux's worries. He was more worried about the golden lion in the champion's possession. Each of the pillars of eternity could bend the laws of the world in a way, and that meant that his opponent could also do this as well. I have a bad feeling about this. Lux suddenly felt a bad premonition rising in the back of his mind. Although he now had a clearer picture as to where the other pillars might be, getting them was easier said than done. In the deepest level of the abyss, the angels were continuing their mission to ensure that one of the strongest outer gods in all of creation remained asleep in the abyss. This powerful being had many names, and among them were Demon Sultan, the Deep Dark, the Cold One, and Nuclear Chaos. But the majority of beings who both worshipped and feared this creature called it the Blind Idiot God. Perhaps out of spite and ridicule, this was the most common name used to refer to the outer god, Azathoth, across the multiverse. Although the name might sound funny and comedic, the moment this being woke up from its slumber, no one, not even the gods, would dare to laugh. Once its sleep ended, the nightmare of all creations would begin. The heavenly music and voices of the angels merged together, creating a perfect harmony that would ease the soul of anyone who heard it. This was how Azathoth was kept asleep for thousands of years. These angels would take turns in their duty, making sure that the creature would sleep for eternity. Or at least, that was the original plan. Suddenly, and without warning, a distortion appeared in the lowest level of the abyss, catching the angels that were on guard duty by surprise. "Halt!" the angel shouted. "This is a restricted area." "I know," a man, wearing black robes that hid his face, answered. "Please leave," the angel commanded. "This is not a place for mortals to dwell." The black-robed man raised his hand, and countless abyssal creatures appeared behind him. The majority of them were calamity-ranked abyssal beings, and over a dozen demigods were there as well. Those who were singing and dancing noticed the arrival of the uninvited guests, but they didn't dare stop what they were doing as they knew that if they did, no one in existence would be ready to face the consequences. The guards who were sent to protect the performers all formed ranks in order to face the invaders who had come to hinder their mission. "Are you all mad?" the archangel, who oversaw this mission, asked in anger. "Why are all of you doing this? Have you forgotten the oath of the abyss?" The archangel glared at the demigods, who immediately averted their gazes. How could they possibly forget the oath that all the demigods, new and old, had pledged for the sake of the abyss? If Azathoth were to awaken, the first thing that would fall first would definitely be the abyss. Because of this, the demigods who ruled it would even assist the angels from time to time, ensuring that the blind idiot god would remain sleeping in the lowest level of the abyss. "Don't worry. I didn't come here to stop your duties," the black-robed man stated. "Please, continue what you are doing. We don't want to wake up the blind idiot god, right?" Without another word, the black-robed man walked forward, ignoring the angels who had formed an impenetrable wall to prevent him from passing through. "Kill him," the archangel commanded. The fate of the entire multiverse was at stake, so he didn't dare take the chance and immediately ordered to eliminate the person who wished to get in the way of their mission. You angels sure are stubborn, the black-robed man sighed. Fine, have it your way. He then pointed at the incoming angels and sneered. Kill, the black-robed man ordered. Immediately, the demigods and the calamity-ranked abyssal monsters clashed with the angels. The demigods were holding back their attacks because they themselves didn't want to do this. However, they were currently being manipulated by the black-robed man against their will. The calamity-ranked monsters were also in the same boat. Their bestial instincts were telling them that the gigantic outer god in front of them was very dangerous, but they were unable to defy the person who had forced them into submission. While the battle was in full swing, the black-robed man casually took a stroll towards where Azathoth was sleeping. He was even humming a playful tune, contrasting the angels desperately trying to stop his advance. However, the demigods, who were protecting the man, got in their way. As for the angels who were able to get past their defenses, the black-robed man only raised his hand, which caused all of them to crash on the ground as if they were being pinned down by an invisible force. Divine blood flowed like a river as the defenders were cut down one by one. This battle was not one-sided, but any angel who dared to come within a few meters of the black-robed man would either die in the hands of demigods or die from the man's mysterious power. Stop! The archangel shouted anxiously. You can't go any further. Like I said, I only came here to do a task, the black-robed man replied. I have no intention of waking Azathoth, but all of you want to get in my way. If you really want to die that badly, then go ahead and stop me, that is, if you can. The black-robed man sneered as he continued to walk forward. The performing angels kept on singing and dancing. However, it was very obvious that they were scared *+ about what the black-robed man was going to do. An inner battle was raging inside the archangel's head. He wanted to stop the invader even if he had to risk his life in doing so. His other half was telling him that even if he did attack the mortal, nothing would change. He would just be dying like a dog, unable to stop what was about to come. In the end, duty won over his other concerns. The archangel shouted and dove down from the sky, emitting light like a sun. No matter what happened to him, he must not allow the black-robed man to gamble with the lives of the entire multiverse. Stubborn fool, the black-robed man said with a hint of annoyance. He then raised his hand, and just like what happened to the other angels earlier, the archangel stopped moving, as if he was bound by invisible chains that prevented him from doing anything. The black-robed man then pierced the archangel's chest and grabbed his heart. Without even showing any signs of mercy, the man crushed the archangel's heart, making the protector explode in a shower of golden sparks. Continue your performance, the black-robed man said in a cold tone. Any of you who dares to stop me will die just like your leader. Although the angels were all indignant and angry about what was happening around them, they truly didn't stop what they were doing. Because of this, the black-robed man walked unhindered until he was only a meter away from the sleeping outer god, who seemed oblivious to what was happening around it. Finally, the black-robed man said as he pierced his chest with his right hand, "My long wait is over." His face distorted due to the pain he was feeling, but he endured it as he pulled something out of his body. A golden lion, which was coated with his heart's blood, appeared in his hand. With this, all the worlds in existence are mine for the taking. The black-robed man laughed despite the pain he was feeling. He then pushed the golden lion onto the body of the sleeping outer god without a second thought. A moment later, the pillar of eternity was swallowed by the body of the outer god. Without any warning, a mist of miasma was released from Azathoth's body, which immediately flew towards the gaping hole on the man's chest as if it was being sucked up by something. The man shuddered in ecstasy as power flooded his body. He had been waiting for decades to get to where he was now, and all the sacrifices he made during those years had finally borne fruit. The hole in his chest healed completely, and several black markings, resembling tattoos, appeared on his body. Suddenly, a blob of flesh emerged from the outer god's body and crashed beside the black-robed man. From the blob of flesh, a creature that looked hideous and very alien materialized in front of everyone. It stood up on two legs, but countless tentacles were wriggling from its body. Its head, which was similar to the head of an alien, had one long tentacle sticking out of it as if it was a whip that it could use to lash at its foes at any given time. This horrible creature looked down at the man standing before it and smiled. "Very bold of you, mortal, to gamble with the lives of all of creation," the creature said in a hoarse voice. "However, I don't dislike your courage. Tell me, what is your wish?" The black-robed man looked up at the creature, who was the embodiment of any sane person's worst nightmare. "First, I want revenge," the black-robed man replied. "After that, conquest of the various worlds of creation." "Very well," the alien-like creature replied. "I will assist you in this endeavor, and in exchange, I want you to sacrifice millions of lives in every world that you conquer, all for the sake of the outer gods." "Deal," the man replied. "What is your name?" The alien-like creature smiled, showing its countless horrendous razor-sharp teeth. "I am the crawling chaos, Nyarlathotep declared. And on this day, the nightmares of mortals and immortals alike will become their realities. We will be in your care in the future, Lux," Kai's and Rose's mother, Dahlia, said as she gave her future son-in-law a hug. "Take care of Caitlin. She's my precious daughter." "I will," Lux replied. "I promise." Dahlia nodded before walking over to Keen to give him a hug as well. "Take care of my daughter. She might be a handful at times," Dahlia whispered in Keen's ear, "but she is a very good girl." "I will treasure her with my life," Keen replied as he looked at his future mother-in-law with a determined look on his face. Dahlia was very impressed with the young swordsman's reply, making her smile. "My daughters managed to find themselves good partners," Dahlia thought. "Although it's still a bit early for Rose, I hope that Caitlin will let me hold my grandchild soon." While Dahlia was thinking these things, Rose pulled Keen away from her mother with a pout. "I'm not a handful." Rose, who had expected that her mother would say something like that, had used an ability that increased her hearing perception. This allowed her to hear what her mother was saying to his lover, which made her pout. Dahlia didn't reply, and only giggled after seeing how adorable Rose was at the moment. It was very rare for her serious daughter to act in this manner, so she was enjoying every moment of it. "I'll see you soon, father-in-law," Lux said to Liam, who was completely ignoring him. The middle-aged man didn't even bother to look in his direction and went up the stairs, leaving them behind. Lux scratched his head after seeing his father-in-law's reaction, but he didn't take the middle-aged man's dislike for him too seriously. After all, the one he was marrying was Kai, not Liam. He didn't mind even if his father-in-law didn't like him. "Lux, be careful," Kiana said as she held the half-elf's hand. "What you are about to do is very dangerous. Collecting all the pillars will be very dangerous, so if you think that you are unable to do it, do not force yourself. We can migrate to Elysium. You must prioritize your safety, okay?" The half-elf nodded in reply. "See you all soon." Maximilian decided to stay in the ancestral lands for a few more days because he had missed his wife terribly. Also, he still needed to discuss his plan to migrate to the Finn Kingdom with his people who were still recovering from the Purple Plague. "Rose, please send them off at the entrance of the mountain," Dahlia said. "Yes, mother," Rose replied before holding Keen's hand. The young swordsman smiled as he lightly squeezed his lover's hand. Lux and Kai, who noticed the small gesture between the two, exchanged knowing glances with each other. The half-elf then reached out to hold Kai's and Aurora's hands, making the two girls smile. It's good to be young," Dahlia nodded her head in satisfaction. "Kai, I want to hold my great-grandchild soon, so make sure to feed Lux one of our tribe's powerful aphrodisiac potions and go at it like bunnies, okay? Aurora, feel free to join them as well. Your child is my great-grandchild as well." Aurora blushed after hearing the old lady's playful words, but she still nodded her head and gave Lux a timid glance. The half-elf couldn't help but chuckle internally due to how cute Aurora looked like when she was embarrassed. A few minutes later, Lux's group left the ancestral lands of the Rowan tribe and entered the underground maze under Kai's guidance. Although Dahlia had asked Rose to lead them out of the mountain, the young lady and Keen were at the rear of the group, enjoying the precious time they had in each other's company. Kai was the one who led everyone back down the mountain, letting Rose spend as much time as she could with her fiancé. Lux even told Kai through their guild chat to slow their journey a bit because they weren't really in a hurry. Since Rose would be staying in the ancestral lands, it would be a while before she would be able to see Keen again. The young swordsman was doing his best to become strong as soon as possible. In fact, after they returned to Barbados Academy, Keen would then head to Leaf Town. Gerhardt and Cephas had already made their way into the Savage Lands and were helping the draconian kobold, Cadmus, explore this new frontier. Keen would be accompanying them on this mission to train himself and grow stronger. Although Lux wasn't telling them anything, they could instinctively feel that there was a shift that was happening in Elysium. After Lux had waged war against the divine army of light, Keen, Gerhardt, and Cephas said that they needed to become as strong as possible. They didn't want to get left behind by the half-elf, who was always surprising them. There was also the issue of the abyssal gates becoming more active, which only intensified their resolve to become stronger. Every one of them could feel it. The world of Elysium was about to usher in a new era, and in this era, a great battle would soon take place. This was why, before it happened, the three of them wanted to at least become beer anchors, giving them enough strength to at least survive the first wave of whatever was about to come their way. A few hours later, they finally arrived at the base of the mountain. "Visit me soon, okay?" Rose said as she was wrapped in Keen's protective embrace. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too," Keen replied before planting a kiss on Rose's forehead, the sight of which made Lux nearly vomit sugar. He wasn't aware that other people also felt the same thing whenever he was acting intimate with his lovers. In fact, Cephas was very fed up with him, so the moment the half-elf and his lovers were about to stick to each other like glue, he would make himself scarce to save himself from the diabetic-inducing kissing that would follow next. 10 minutes later, Keen and Rose reluctantly parted with each other. If not for the fact that Keen wanted to catch up to Lux as soon as possible, he might have stayed with Rose for a few more days. However, he understood that the only way he could protect his lover was by becoming stronger, so with a heavy heart, he turned around without a second glance. He had a feeling that if he were to look back and see Rose's tearful face, his resolve might waver, and he'd end up staying with her until her grandpa, Maximilian, decided to return to Barbados Academy. "Don't worry, you will see her soon," Lux assured his good friend, who had been with him through thick and thin. Keen nodded and continued to walk alongside them. Now that he had met Kai's parents, it was time to bring Adeline to his guild headquarters in the territory of the Crystal Palace. That way, his other lovers would be able to meet their future mother-in-law. Valerie, Aurelia, Aina, Ali, and Ari were constantly asking him about when he would be bringing his mother to their guild headquarters. If not for the fact that there were still things that he needed to settle in Wildguard Stronghold, he might have teleported directly to their guild headquarters already, along with everyone else in his group. Ford Federation. Originally, Aiko was supposed to visit the other island nations in order to go sightseeing. However, one of her clones, that she had left in the Ford Federation, told her that the pirates were waiting for her to pass judgment on the people that they had captured. Because of this, the two baby slimes reluctantly canceled their trip and returned to the Ford Federation. "Bring the prisoners," one of the pirates shouted. Immediately, dozens of men and women, who were bound by chains, climbed aboard the bone ship, Poseidon. There, they saw two baby slimes who were eating biscuits and looking at them with grumpy looks on their faces. The people that were brought for Aiko's judgment were the surviving members of the families that had once ruled the Ford Federation with an iron fist. Their once arrogant faces were nowhere to be seen, and only a defeated look could be seen. These were the people who had trampled on the lives of others and did whatever they wanted because of their family background. Many lives had been lost because of them. Many families had been ruined because of them. And anyone who dared to voice any form of opposition would be silenced, or worse, killed, leaving no part of their bodies behind to bury. After eating the one cheese, Aiko's senses had been enhanced, allowing her to perceive the emotions of those whom she was looking at. To a certain extent, Aiko could also sense which were bad people and which were not. This was an inherent ability that even she couldn't understand. When she was back in the Finn Kingdom, she had used this ability to look at her papa. At that moment, Aiko had sensed that her papa was a bad person. Lux wasn't innocent. He wasn't a saint. Throughout his journey, he was forced to make hard choices, and those choices had claimed countless lives. Instead of being disappointed, Eiko was even happy because as a monster, she understood that kindness would not always be repaid with kindness. She felt this very strongly when she died for the first time. It was at that moment when she understood that life wasn't fair, and those with power could do whatever they wanted just because they could. Although Lux was bad according to the power she gained, she was still her papa. So, in her eyes, Lux was a good, bad person. In fact, when Eiko looked at Asmodeus and Avernus, those two bad guys were worse than her papa. They were practically oozing a black aura that rose to the heavens, which meant that if her papa was a bad guy, Asmodeus and Avernus were the baddest of the bad guys. But, since they were his papa's underlings, they were good bad guys as well. Eiko was very biased when it came to her allies. But, this bias didn't extend to her enemies. Now, as the baby slime looked at the people in front of her, she didn't hesitate to point out the people that were bad, and those who were not so bad, who didn't deserve to die. The pirates were more than happy to deal with the bad guys. As for the not-so-bad guys, they were going to be exiled from the Ford Federation. Eiko had given this job to Captain Jack Spawow, whom she trusted the most among her Boom Boom pirate crew. This purge and punishment process lasted for 2 weeks. When everything had settled down, the Ford Federation was finally fully under her control. Since Eiko didn't plan on staying in the Ford Federation for a long time, she designated one of her loyal underlings, who went by the name Lupin, to become its steward. She believed that this man was capable of managing her territory while she was away. After settling this issue, Eiko commanded Avery to set sail to the island nation nearest to the Ford Federation. This island nation was called Torstein. According to Captain Jack Spawow, it was a place that was well known for its spices, which was a very important commodity in several nations. Eiko, who liked to eat many delicious foods, planned to visit this place in order to try new dishes that she hadn't eaten before. Due to Poseidon's speed, it only took them half a day to arrive at their destination. However, when they neared the Torstein territory, the baby slime noticed something peculiar. Several battleships lined the shore, as if they were preparing for an invasion. The moment Poseidon was sighted, a loud ringing sound reverberated at the port city of Wolfston, which was the Torstein nation's first line of defense. Avery halted the flying ship and stared at the battleships that were lying in wait for their arrival. "Princess, your orders?" Avery asked. Eiko looked down at the countless battleships. Truth be told, she had no intention of fighting the people of Torstein because they didn't have any conflict with her. She just came to their island to eat, but seeing how strongly they were reacting to her presence, she decided to send Avery to settle things as peacefully as possible. After receiving his orders, the ancient pirate king descended from the skies and landed on the biggest battleship, which he believed to be the flagship of the nation of Torstein. He was immediately met with 2 supremes, who stared at him with solemn expressions on their faces. "Are you perhaps Avery?" a middle-aged man with gray hair asked. "You did your research well," Avery replied. "You're right. I am Avery." "What is your purpose for coming to our nation?" the middle-aged man inquired. "To eat," Avery replied, making the 2 supremes draw their weapons. Seeing their reaction, Avery chuckled because he understood that they had misunderstood him. "We didn't come here to eat anyone," Avery stated. "We came here to eat food. Your nation is known for its spices and delicious cuisine. My princess has come to put your reputation to the test." "How can we believe you?" the other supreme, who was an old lady, asked. "How can we believe your words? Especially after what has happened in the Ford Federation?" Avery crossed his arms over his chest. Eiko had given him the task to handle this mission as peacefully as possible. Because of this, he decided to use his trump card to settle this matter peacefully. "I'll give you 2 choices," Avery stated. "Satisfy my princess wishes, or we go to war. There is no third option. You already know what happened to the Ford Federation. We don't mind doing the same to your nation." "Bastard!" the middle-aged man glared at Avery, his hands trembling as he held the sword in his hand. "So, you want to use force to settle this matter?" The old lady squinted her eyes. Avery chuckled. "I think you are misunderstanding something here. Whether you agree or not, my princess will have what she wants." The only difference is that you can either treat her like a VIP guest and get on her good side, or you treat us as your enemy and have your entire nation suffer the same fate as the Ford Federation. The only reason why none of you aren't dead right now is because our princess is a good monster. Do you really think that, with our army, we would have trouble destroying your pitiful attempt at resistance? The two Supremes frowned. However, before they could even answer, both of their bodies shuddered uncontrollably. They then looked up at the flying giant bone ship and saw the ship's bow open up like the jaws of a shark. Inside its jaw were countless razor-sharp teeth. But the thing that made the two Supremes shudder was the gigantic cannon that could easily fit 5 of their flagships inside of it. The muzzle of the cannon emitted a brilliant light, which made the faces of the two Supremes turn grim. They knew that if that cannon unleashed its attack, their entire navy, and perhaps the port city, would be obliterated with a single shot. "Looks like Poseidon isn't as patient as I am," Avery commented. "Tell you what, I'll give you 10 seconds to give me an answer. Are you going to treat our princess like a VIP and let her eat to her heart's content? Or do we do it our way? Choose." The two Supremes could only smile bitterly as they signaled for their men to stand down. In the face of absolute strength, the only thing that they could do was to allow Eiko to have her way. What they didn't know was that the baby slime was unaware of what Poseidon was doing. She and Fei Fei had been taken by the skeleton swashbucklers to the galley of the ship, where the finest chefs of the Ford Federation had finished preparing her lunch. Poseidon took this opportunity, while its master was away, to help the nation decide to settle things peacefully as well. In the end, its method worked, and the two Supremes of the Torstein nation accompanied Avery back to the bone ship. They were going to ensure that their people would not do anything to the baby slime, who had allegedly come to their nation as a tourist and connoisseur. Although they didn't fully trust Avery, they decided that there would be no harm to agree to his request to treat Eiko as a VIP guest. Because of this, Eiko had a good impression of them and happily ordered Poseidon to enter the island nation that would soon understand that they made a grave mistake letting the harmless-looking baby slime enter their domain. As the two adorable baby slimes entered the island nation of Torstein in a peaceful manner, Lux had returned to Barbados Academy to finish a few things before he went back to Elysium. Keen didn't stay for long either, and immediately went to Leaf Town to catch up with his comrades in the Savage Lands. After fighting against Rose's father, he understood that his technique was still lacking and that he needed to polish it as soon as possible. The half-elf spent 2 days in Barbados Academy to rest, giving Valerie, Ollie, and Ari some time to convince the Dragon Empress to allow them to go to the territory of the Crystal Palace. Valerie claimed that she and Or were good friends now, and that it would be best to strengthen her connection with the Dragon Prince, which would, in turn, also strengthen the relationship of the two Dragon Kingdoms, ensuring the peace of both parties. The Dragon Princess mother, Empress Saphira, thought that this was a sound reason to allow Valerie to spend some time with the Dragon Prince, who was the same age as her. In a political view, a union between Valerie and Or would solve all the problems between the two Dragon Kingdoms that were currently in a cold war with each other. The Dragon King also didn't have a problem with this arrangement. Just like his wife, he allowed Valerie to visit the Crystal Palace for a week. Of course, she would not be going alone. She would be escorted by Lady Faustina, who was the twin sister of the Crystal Palace's reigning steward, Lady Augustina. After getting her parents' permission, Valerie immediately informed Lux that they would arrive at his guild headquarters in 2 days. Since this was technically a diplomatic mission, proper procedures had to be followed to inform the Crystal Palace of Valerie's arrival. Although there was a slight delay, Lux didn't mind it too much. "We will go to the guild headquarters tomorrow," Lux said to Iris, Kai, Aurora, and Adeline. "My other lovers can't wait to meet you, Mother." "The same goes for me," Adeline replied. "I am very excited to meet my future daughters-in-law." Lux was also very curious to see what his mother's reaction would be when she saw his other lovers for the first time. However, he didn't forget to tell his mother about the complicated relationship he had with the two dragon princesses. "Valerie and Or will have guards observing them, Mother," Lux stated. "Right now, we can't let our relationship be discovered by their families. If that happens, things might get very troublesome." "I understand." Adeline nodded. "I will be extra careful when interacting with them." Vera glanced at Lux, and the latter nodded his head in understanding. I need to stay here in Barbados Academy and hold the fort, Vera stated. Alexander is currently busy in the Finn Kingdom, organizing the manpower and other human resources. It might take a while before he returns here. With you here, Grandma, I'm sure that everything will be well, Lux replied. The half-elf then glanced at the other ladies in the room and asked them to prepare for their trip to Elysium. Iris and Kai would accompany them to Lux's guild headquarters in order to reunite with their sisters, who were on a diplomatic mission to strengthen their bonds with the Crystal Palace. Of course, all of them knew that this was just an excuse they made up so that they could meet Adeline and strengthen their bond with the half-elf further through rolling on the sheets with him. A day later, Lux and the ladies teleported to their guild headquarters in order to prepare for Valerie's, Ali, and Ari's arrival. Since only Lady Faustina would accompany them, Lux thought that it would not be too hard to find some private time with Valerie during their visit. If worse comes to worst, the half-elf could ask Aurelia to help him convince Lady Augustina to invite her sister to have an afternoon tea with her, or something along those lines. Adeline, who was seeing Lux's guild headquarters for the first time, couldn't help but look at the majestic white marble castle in awe. Is this really your guild headquarters, Lux? Adeline asked. It is, Mother, Lux replied. So, what do you think? I think it's great. Adeline looked at the castle in front of her with a smile. This is the first time I'm seeing a guild headquarters built like a castle. Lux then pointed at the town at the base of the mountain with pride. That town also belongs to me, Mother, Lux said. That is the town of Edia. It took a while for construction to finish, but it was finally completed. There are not many people in there right now, but I can give you a tour later, if you're interested. I'd love that, Adeline replied. But I'd like to meet your other lovers first. Lux smiled. They'll be here by tomorrow. Until then, I can ask Emma to serve as your tour guide. Just as Lux was about to say more, dozens of baby slimes came jumping out of the castle doors with big smiles on their faces. Following behind them was none other than the Wicked Queen Slime, Lillian, whom Lux hadn't seen for a while. You kids are too excited, Lillian said with a helpless look on her face as she watched the baby slimes jump all over the place, eager to explore their new environment. A few seconds later, she finally noticed the half-elf as well as the ladies beside him. It has been a while, Lux, Lillian greeted. I heard about your adventures over the past few weeks. I have to say, you've grown a lot since the time we last saw each other. Is she perhaps your new lover? Lillian pointed at Adeline, whose face immediately reddened after being mistaken as her own son's new lover. Lux knew that if he didn't correct the misunderstanding, Lillian would start teasing his mother, which would further embarrass her. She's not my lover, Lux replied. She is my mother. Lillian blinked once then twice before the corner of her lips curled up into a smirk. So, you're fed up with young maidens and wanted to taste the charms of married women? Lillian asked in a teasing tone. I got to say, your fetish is evolving at a very fast rate, young man. Good for you. Lillian, please don't say things that will cause further misunderstandings, Lux stated. She is my mother, biological mother, Adeline Farron Finn. Mother, this is Lillian. Don't be deceived by her looks. She is actually a peak calamity rank monster. However, she had retired from terrorizing people and had taken the job of being the nanny of these baby slimes. As if understanding that Lux was talking about them, all the baby slimes started to jump in his direction. Some of these baby slimes were newly hatched, so they were filled with curiosity. They gathered around him and started jumping in place. Aya, 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 Aya. The baby slimes then started to crawl up Lux's body. Some nudged his cheeks, some bit his ears, some jumped in place on top of his head, while others entered his shirt and slept like the baby they were, with their heads resting on his chest. Seeing the adorable scene of the baby slimes having their way with Lux, Adeline and the girls couldn't help but feel as if their hearts were melting due to how cute the baby slimes were. Iris and Kai both remembered their own baby slimes, Aiko and Fei Fei, who were also quite clingy back when they were still newborns. But now, those two baby slimes had grown up and were currently in an adventure together. Lillian giggled after seeing the babies swarm around Lux and play with him. One of the reasons why the wicked Queen Slime had a good impression of the half-elf was due to Eiko. Another reason was the baby slimes and their nursery in his guild headquarters and in Leaf Town. In her eyes, these two places were paradise. Her maternal instincts had urged her to stay and protect these precious children until they became strong enough to protect their own. Just like Eiko and Fei Fei, whom the baby slimes in Leaf Town treated as their idol and older sister. Lillian, can you call these little ones for a bit? Lux said as he remained standing. He didn't dare to move too much because he might accidentally step on the baby slimes that were gathered around his feet. Fine, Lillian commented. All of you come. We will go visit the town. They have many delicious foods to eat there. Aya, Aya, Aya. All the baby slimes then crawled toward the wicked Queen Slime in haste. Truth be told, they were quite hungry, so the notion of food easily swayed them to stop playing with the half-elf and follow their nanny. We'll be off then, Lillian stated. I'll talk to you later, Lux. I want some modifications done for the monster nursery. Fine, Lux replied. But if you want to send proposals, talk to Emma next time. She has the authority to make changes in the guild headquarters. I'll keep that in mind. Lillian nodded before transforming into her wicked Queen Slime form. All the baby slimes excitedly climbed on top of her body, and some of them even urged Lillian to move. Since they were just born, most of them were fearless, not understanding that the one they were riding on was one of the strongest monsters in existence. Without another word, Lillian steadily descended down the mountain while making sure that none of the babies fell off from her body. It was an incredible sight, and this was the first time Lux and the other ladies were seeing something like this. A few minutes later, they entered the headquarters and were greeted by Emma, who had just finished preparing the room that Adeline would be using during her stay. Welcome back, Master, Emma bowed respectfully to Lux. Thank you, Emma, Lux replied. You've worked hard. The dwarf smiled and nodded her head before shifting her gaze to the beautiful elf, who was his master's mother. Lady Adeline, please allow me to give you a tour of our guild headquarters, Emma said as she walked towards the elf, who was visiting their guild headquarters for the first time. Thank you, Emma, Adeline replied. Lux has said many things about you. Really? Yes. He always says that you're a hard worker. I can now understand why he is able to leave the management of his guild in your hands. A faint redness appeared on Emma's face after hearing Adeline's praise. While Lux also praised her from time to time, hearing the half-elf's mother praise her made her feel as if everything she had done for the guild was worth it. Because of this, her impression of Adeline went up by a notch. She was now more eager to give the beautiful elf a tour of Lux's guild headquarters, and later the town of Edia, to help Lux's mother familiarize herself with the domain that belonged to her son. Lux watched as his mother followed her secretary inside the guild headquarters, leaving him, Iris, Kai, and Aurora behind. Well then, what should the three of us do while waiting for Mother to return? Lux asked. Let's go to your room, Iris proposed. I'd like to monopolize you before my other sisters arrive. Indeed, Kai nodded. It will be hard to do that by then since all of them will want to have a turn. Aurora didn't immediately understand what Iris and Kai were talking about, but a few seconds later, realization dawned upon her, making her suddenly blush. Do you want to join us, Aurora? Iris asked in a teasing tone. She knew that Lux still hadn't made her move on the pink-haired beauty, which was why she wanted to help her get close to Lux. However, contrary to her expectations, Aurora shook her head. The three of you should spend some time together, Aurora replied. Don't mind me. I'm not in a hurry. Are you sure? Kai inquired. Don't be shy. You can come join us. I promise you that it will be a memorable experience. Although Aurora was tempted to say yes, she still shook her head in the end. She then glanced at Lux as if asking him for help in order to escape from this sticky situation. Aurora is still not ready for this, Lux said as he held Iris and Kai's hands. Give her some time to prepare her heart and mind. Well, if you say so. Iris nodded her head in understanding. Kai smiled and also nodded her head. She had been wanting to ask Lux why he still hadn't made his move on Aurora, but she decided to ask him later after they were done with their lovemaking. Aurora entered the guild headquarters with them before heading straight to her assigned bedroom. She hurriedly locked the door and laid down on her bed. Aurora didn't have to be in the same room as them to take part in their intimate moment. Her ability automatically manifested whenever Lux was about to make love with his lovers. A few minutes later, a familiar sensation washed over Aurora's body. She knew with absolute certainty that she would soon be drowned by the pleasure that would be shared to her by her two sisters. Her two sisters who had no idea that she would also enjoy the same sensations that they would feel once their beloved half-elf had his way with their beautiful and seductive bodies. "It's good to see you again, sister," Lady Augustina said with a smile. "How have you been?" "Busy," Lady Faustina replied. "How about you?" Lady Augustina sighed. "The same as you. We are making contingency plans just in case multiple abyssal gates appear near our territory." Lady Faustina nodded her head in understanding. The Divine Army had informed them that the power of the Abyss was growing every day. They even predicted that as early as a month, the abyssal creatures would once again invade their world. Of course, this was just a theory. However, the rulers of each kingdom and empire couldn't brush this warning aside. The Divine Army had dedicated their lives in fighting against the abyssal invasion. Although they had done some overbearing things in the past, for them, everything they did was for the greater good. Of course, Lux disagreed with that notion, and even took the initiative to attack the kingdoms and empires that were under the Divine Army's umbrella. Knowing that this continuous conflict would not benefit anyone, the founder and the sovereign of the Divine Army asked the High King of the Elves, the Dragon King of Karshvar Draconis, as well as the steward of the Crystal Palace to help mediate the situation. For the time being, both sides agreed to a compromise and the war between the half-elf and the Divine Army was put on hold. At least for the time being. This allowed the various kingdoms and empires to make the necessary preparations for the abyssal invasion, which might happen at any given time, according to the Divine Army. Even Memento Mori, who had not made any moves for the past decade, also announced to the world that the battle against the abyssal creatures should be everyone's priority. For this mysterious organization of necromancers, whom no one wanted to offend, to make a declaration like this proved that what the Divine Army's statement wasn't just a bunch of nonsense. Because of this, everyone stopped their petty wars with each other and made preparations for a battle that would shake the very foundations of this world. "Tell me, is Or looking for a wife?" Lady Faustina asked. "Why are you suddenly asking this?" Lady Augustina arched an eyebrow. "Is your master perhaps thinking of matchmaking Valerie and Or?" Lady Faustina nodded. "He hopes that the union of the two will finally put an end to the Cold War between the two dragon kingdoms." Lady Augustina wanted to laugh after hearing her sister's words. Of course, she couldn't blame her because to the world, Or was a dragon prince and not a dragon princess. The enchantment placed on her body was so powerful that even a supreme would not be able to peer through it to see her true gender. But, since Lady Augustina more or less understood why Valerie was intent on seeing Or, she played along with her sister. "Well, a union between them is possible, Lady Augustina. Both of them are almost the same age, and they seem to get along with each other. Perhaps after a year or two, we can all sit down and talk about this. For now, let the two of them deepen their connection with each other. Things like this cannot be forced, you know?" Lady Faustina sighed before nodding her head in agreement. "I guess you're right, sister. But, since we are on this topic, the possibility exists, right?" Lady Augustina smiled. She knew that Aurelia and Valerie liked Lux, and this diplomatic visit was more of an excuse so Valerie could spend more time with the half-elf. Aurelia didn't hide anything from Lady Augustina, and she even informed her mother, Empress Evangeline, about her relationship with the half-elf. Of course, the two older ladies were shocked after hearing Or's revelation. But, in the end, they accepted her decision and had become her accomplices since then. The only reason why the two most powerful ladies in the Crystal Palace nodded their heads in approval was due to the fact that Lux was Kyoza's chosen one. Lastly, they had sensed that there was dragon blood flowing inside the half-elf's body. They were quite intrigued by this development, and even asked Kyoza how Lux managed to acquire it. Kyoza didn't hide anything from the two of them, and explained that the blood was a pure blood essence that came from the previous Dragon Emperor. Because of this, The two ladies believed that Lux's body was now capable of transforming into a dragon. Kyoza also mentioned that the half-elf had a special body constitution, which gave him draconic strength and abilities. In the end, Lady Augustina and Empress Evangeline realized that there was no problem even if Lux and Aurelia were to become a couple. With draconic blood running through his veins, it was very likely that he was capable of making Aurelia conceive, allowing their bloodline to continue. Of course, the two ladies were also very amused that Valerie had become Lux's lover as well. Both of them were even looking forward to knowing how the Dragon King of Karshvar Draconis would react after he found out that his precious daughter had already become Lux's woman. While Lady Faustina and Lady Augustina were having an afternoon tea together, things were getting lively inside Lux's guild headquarters. "Mother, does the tea taste good?" Ari asked with a smile. "It does taste good," Adeline replied. "In fact, it is the best tea I've had to drink so far. If you like, I can share with you the tea leaf combinations I use for this, Mother," Ari stated. "This is Ari's secret recipe that I am only willing to share with you." "Thank you, Ari." Adeline smiled. "I look forward to it." Not wanting to lose, Aina also made sure to make a good impression of Adeline. She even sat beside the beautiful elf and did her best to engage her in conversation. In fact, her expressionless face was showing so much expression that Lux, Iris, Kai, Valerie, Aurelia, Aurora, Ali, and Ari thought that someone had kidnapped the real Aina and took her place. But, to everyone's amusement, Aina was only able to keep her animated expression for half an hour before returning to her expressionless appearance. She then stood up and sat on Lux's lap as if she was a mobile phone that required charging. Of course, the half-elf was more than happy to help his lover recharge. If they weren't in front of Adeline, he was certain that little Lux would help fill her up with his energy as well. Adeline couldn't believe that her son had so many fiancés, and all of them were very beautiful. Even her husband, Vincent, whom Lux had reluctantly summoned due to Adeline's pleading, was impressed by his son's harem. Of course, the ladies also made sure to make a good impression on Vincent, but it didn't take long for them to realize that they didn't have to put a lot of effort to do that. Why? Vincent loved beautiful girls, and was even very jealous of his son for having a harem. "If I was still alive, I would have also made a harem," Vincent stated. "In fact, I'm confident that I would have a bigger harem than Lux. After all, between the two of us, I'm more handsome, right?" Lux looked at his father in disdain. The old man was clearly spouting nonsense. How could he possibly be more handsome than him? What a joke. Adeline was also not too happy with how Vincent mentioned that he wanted to have a harem. Realizing that he blundered, Vincent tried to pacify his wife, but it was too late. In the end, it was Adeline who asked Lux to return Vincent's soul to Blackfire, which the half-elf happily obliged. After that small incident, Valerie and Aurelia found themselves sitting beside Adeline, due to the machinations of Iris and Kai. The two ladies knew that the two dragon princesses wanted to know more about her, so they gave way and made it possible. While this was happening, the Draco succubus, Ari, made an excuse of wanting to get some refreshments from the kitchen. However, she made sure to grab Lux's hand and pulled him along with her, making her sister, Ali, arch an eyebrow. "We'll be back soon," Ari winked at Ali, and the latter only shook her head helplessly. They were going to stay in the territory of the Crystal Palace for a week, so she wasn't in a hurry to spend some private time with Lux. But Ari wasn't the same. Ever since Lux took her first time, the beautiful handmaiden always seemed to be in heat whenever the half-elf was around. Of course, the other ladies, with the exception of Adeline, knew this as well. Because of this, they turned a blind eye to Ari's action because they knew that they would be able to spend some time with their lover as well. This was especially true for Valerie, who had long been waiting to be embraced by the handsome half-elf, whom she hadn't seen for a while. 3 days after Valerie, Aina, Ali, and Ari arrived at the Crystal Palace. Lux lightly patted Valerie's head, which was resting on his shoulder. Aurelia, who was looking at the two, couldn't help but be impressed when the half-elf raised Valerie's waist to pull his member out from inside of her. His seed overflowed between her legs, creating an erotic sight that made Aurelia's body heat up. Valerie's angelic face was flushed, and yet the happiness and satisfaction on her face was plain for them to see. "My turn," Aurelia said as she planted a kiss on Valerie's right cheek before kissing the half-elf's cheek as well. "MMM," Valerie hummed as she rolled off Lux's body, giving way for Aurelia, who had allowed her to be the first one to make love to their lover. "I missed you," Lux said before resting his hand on the back of Aurelia's head and pulled her close. Soon the two shared a passionate kiss, which was what Aurelia wanted to do. Among Lux's lovers, Aurelia loved to be kissed the most. Because of this, the half-elf obliged and kissed her passionately as he slowly lowered her hips so that little Lux could kiss her womb as well. A few hours later, the two dragon princesses laid on Lux's shoulders as they did their pillow talk. They had just finished washing each other's body and were talking about their future plans. "So, you snuck out of the Karshvar Draconis with the excuse of forming closer ties with the Crystal Palace?" Lux asked. "Yes," Valerie replied. "Valerie is still innocent," Aurelia replied. "I'm sure her father is thinking of matchmaking the two of us so that the two dragon kingdoms will finally be at peace." Lux could understand why the Dragon King would have that kind of thought. He understood that Karshvar Draconis and the Crystal Palace had conflicting interests due to the succession of the throne. So, he found that the union between Valerie and Aurelia seemed to be the most optimal choice in order to finally put the conflict to rest. The half-elf wasn't well versed in politics, but he read plenty of novels back on Earth and understood that this was a method that kings used in order to form an alliance with other kingdoms. Of course, he only found this amusing because Aurelia, whom everyone thought of as the Dragon Prince, was actually a dragon princess. Also, both dragon princesses were now his lovers and were intent on having his babies. He found this very endearing, so whenever he made love to them, he made sure to remove the everlasting ring, which prevented him from making his lovers conceive. While the three of them were talking, their discussion shifted to the current situation in Elysium. "Father said that we don't have to worry even if the abyssal creatures were to invade our world," Valerie stated. "He said that he had made adequate preparations for an invasion years ago." "Oh." Lux arched an eyebrow. "Your father is that confident? Maybe he is just saying that so you and your family won't worry." "Perhaps." Valerie nodded. "Truth be told, I am scared. According to the history books that I read in our library, billions of people died when the abyssal creatures descended upon our world. It was the darkest era of Elysium, and if what the divine army is saying is the truth, this invasion will happen soon." Aurelia, who was also trained to become the next ruler of the Crystal Palace, also joined the discussion. "My aunt said that she had also made adequate preparations," Aurelia stated. "It seems that everyone thinks that this war is right around the corner. Although it doesn't show on their faces, everyone seems to be on edge as of late." "Don't worry," Lux said before planting a kiss on Valerie's and Aurelia's foreheads. "We're going to be fine. The people of this world aren't that weak." "Will you also fight when the abyss invades our land?" Aurelia asked. Lux nodded. "Of course." The half-elf was confident that, with his and Aiko's forces under their command, they would be able to help the people of Elysium repel the invaders from the abyss. The war against the divine army had taught him many things. Because of this, he planned to travel the lands of Elysium, looking for ancient battlefields where great wars were fought. Glee had also visited the nursery a day ago and fed the baby slimes the beast cores that allowed them to learn the skill, Blast Bomb. Currently, Aiko's best friend was stockpiling weapons of mass destruction that were being stored within the underground kobold nest, inside the floating island. The production of the gyrocopters had also started. Lux's current advantage was his aerial superiority. Since his floating island could travel anywhere, they would be able to go to any battlefields and act as reinforcements. He had already discussed this matter with Emma and General Garrett, who were also making sure that their logistical preparations would be enough in the case there was a prolonged war against the abyssal creatures. Lux had been in the abyss once, and if they were just going to talk about statistics, he believed that the number of demigods that the abyss had was greater than the number of demigods and supremes in Elysium. Of course, not all demigods were warmongers, but the majority of them were. Although he wasn't certain, Lux believed that Queen Rhiannon and Antero would not side with the invaders this time around. In fact, he also wanted to visit the Abyss undercover to better understand the strength of their forces. But the domain of the Fallen, where the portal that led to the Abyss had been, no longer existed. Also, Lux didn't know if it was possible for him to enter the Abyss by going to Zangrila, the kingdom that had been destroyed by the Abyss in the past, and the place where Lux met GAAP for the first time. That place held a special place in Lux's heart because it was there where he had gained the qualifications to become a Heaven's Necromancer. It was there when he made the choice about what kind of Necromancer he wanted to become. It was there when he gained King Leoric's allegiance, allowing him to make the Wraith King his subordinate. Unknown to everyone, a movement was happening within the Abyss. 13th floor of the Abyss. Queen Rhiannon was reading the reports of her subordinates about the recent movements of the Abyssal Lords in the Abyss. She could sense the tension in the air, and she didn't like it. "Little Rhiannon, are you worried?" an ancient voice asked, which made the succubus queen feel less anxious. She then walked towards the balcony of her room and looked at the towering golem, who was seated right beside their castle. "Lord Antero, do you feel it?" Queen Rhiannon asked. "Yes," Antero replied. "Portals, opening soon." As the primordial golem of destruction, Antero could feel any shift in the Abyss. He had also sensed that something had happened at the lowest level of the Abyss, but he didn't make any move to investigate. The reason? It was due to the life that was currently inside the succubus queen's womb. During pregnancy, a succubus would be unable to use their full powers because most of their magical and physical strength was being absorbed by their unborn child. The stronger the succubus, the stronger their child would be when they were born. Of course, the gestation period of a succubus was different from a human, especially if it was a high-ranking succubus like Queen Rhiannon. Instead of 9 months, it would take 15 to 20 months before they gave birth to their child. Antero had no intention of leaving Queen Rhiannon alone during this period of time, especially now that the hierarchy within the Abyss seemed to be changing. As the primordial golem of destruction, he stood at the apex in the Abyss. But, as if to make sure that the succubus queen wouldn't be disturbed by anyone or anything, Antero had sealed the portals that led to the 13th layer of the Abyss an hour ago. He had waited until Queen Rhiannon's subordinates returned from their mission to gather the latest news about the other layers in the Abyss. Antero understood that getting information was also important, so he made sure to wait until all who were sent on their mission had returned. The Golem of Destruction had sensed that something very unusual was happening on the bottom layers, which prompted him to take drastic measures to protect the one person in the Abyss that he considered to be his family. Now that the 13th layer of the Abyss was sealed, they were cut off from the other layers of the Abyss, whose leaders were also starting to feel the changes that were happening in their world. In a field of flowers sat 2 little girls. One of the 2 little girls looked like she was around 4 to 5 years old. Her short pink hair gently fluttered as she busied herself in creating a wreath of flowers for her little sister, who was seated beside her. Her sister, who seemed to be around 2 years old, was helping her by handing her one flower after the other. This little girl had blonde hair and blue eyes. Both of them looked like dolls due to how adorable and beautiful they were. Not far from them, 3 adults were looking at the 2 girls with affectionate expressions on their faces. One was a young lady who seemed to be in her early 20s, with long pink hair and pink eyes. She was recording the scene of the 2 little girls with a magical artifact, which she would store in her personal collection. Beside her was a red-headed half-elf, who was looking at the 2 girls fondly. Last but not the least was a doll-like beauty, who was seated beside the half-elf as she looked at her daughter with a gentle smile on her face. A few minutes later, the little girl with pink hair finished the wreath of flowers that she was making. She then placed it on her little sister's head, making the latter clap her hands happily. Satisfied with her work, she then stood up and helped her sister stand up as well. Both of them slowly walked towards their parents, who were watching them from the shade of the tree. A chuckle escaped the half-elf's lips as he stood up to walk towards his daughters. He could have waited for them to reach the tree, but he found his 2 angels too adorable to resist. Seeing their papa walk toward them, the 2 little girls squealed and walked faster with their hands spread wide. The handsome half-elf scooped up his beloved daughters and peppered their cheeks with kisses, making the two girls giggle and squirm in his hold. A minute later, both girls kissed their papa on the cheeks, making him smile from ear to ear. "Let's go home?" the half-elf asked his kids, and the two nodded their heads. He then walked towards the tree where his two wives were waiting for him with a grin plastered on his face. "Aurora, Aina, let's go home," Lux said. "Okay," Aurora replied. Aina nodded. The family of 5 then walked side by side and later turned into particles of light. Lux slowly opened his eyes and sighed. The dream he just had was so sweet, making him feel warm and fuzzy inside. Sleeping beside him were 2 naked beauties who were sleeping peacefully with their heads resting on his chest. They were none other than Aina and Aurora, who had spent the night with him. Although Aurora was also in the room, the only one who went all the way with Lux a few hours ago was Aina. He understood that Aurora wanted their first time to be special, so he only did foreplay with her and helped her find release. Looking at the 2 sleeping ladies beside him, Lux couldn't help but remember the dream he just had. A family, Lux thought. Perhaps he had the dream due to his lover's influence. Valerie and Aurelia were not the only ones who wanted to give birth to his children. All of his lovers did, but he knew that it wasn't the right time to get all of them pregnant. Ali and Ari, who had also spent the night with him, also made him promise that after Valerie had safely given birth, he would agree to make them conceive his child as well. But just a few hours ago, Aina also made her wishes known, which surprised him. Lux thought that getting pregnant was the last thing the doll-like beauty wanted to happen, because she was still busy helping the Xeno Empire consolidate the new territories that he had given them. Although Aina's parents were happy to have new territories under their rule, it also brought a lot of trouble, and not to mention, paperwork. This made Aina's father, Victor, extremely busy. When Lux asked if the doll-like beauty was sure of her decision, Aina said yes in a heartbeat. Because of this, their lovemaking session had become a little rough. But in the end, Lux didn't remove the everlasting ring from his finger. Aina also knew the reason, so she didn't say anything. Right now, giving birth to a child was very risky, especially in light of the increased activity of the Abyssal Gates. As the leader of the guild, Serenity, and the princess of the Xeno Empire, Aina needed to be in peak condition in order to face the possible invasion that would occur. Having a baby would not only endanger her, but also the child whom she was carrying as well. As for Aurora, she didn't ask Lux for a child like the others. She only wished to be by his side and stay with him forever. Even so, Lux still had a dream where a pink-haired little girl, who had similar features to Aurora, was playing with Aina's baby girl. Of course, since it was only a dream, he didn't really know if his future kids would truly look like the little girls in his dreams. However, seeing them tugged his heartstrings, making him anticipate the day when he would hold his children in his arms. Perhaps feeling lost in his thoughts, he subconsciously rubbed Aina's and Aurora's abdomens, feeling the softness of their skin. Right now, there wasn't any obvious bulge to them, but in the future, he would certainly make that happen. Lux, who was still deep in his thoughts, didn't notice that the eyes of the sleeping ladies beside him started to flutter. Soon, the two of them opened their eyes and sleepily looked at the half-elf, who was still rubbing their abdomens. Since Aina and Aurora were facing each other, both of them gave each other a knowing glance and closed their eyes at the same time. The sun still hadn't risen, and it was too early to get up. Because of this, they decided to sleep for a little while longer and return to their dream. A dream where they were walking side by side with Lux while holding their daughters in their arms. A dream where they no longer had to fight any wars and could spend their days in bliss with the company of their daughters and the half-elf, who had faced countless horrors and heartaches at World's End.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.